What are we going to cut out? What do you mean?
How's your ball?
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God in the beginning. All things were made by him. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness does not comprehend. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. God became man to die for all men. This is the true miracle of Christmas.
I don't know how many of you get excited about things astrological. I don't mean following my horoscope in the paper, but I love seeing the magnificent displays that God puts forth in the heavens above. I love it. Stephen and I drove 15 hours each way to be able to see the eclipse in 2017. It was pretty spectacular and amazing. We were thrilled to be able to have that experience together with my parents. I'm excited tomorrow night. You may be tracking this, that the two planets, Jupiter and Saturn, are going to align, and we're just going to see one giant planet. And from our perspective, because of the way the sun is, it'll look like a giant star. And some people think that it may be an alignment like this of Jupiter and Saturn and maybe our moon that all came together and looked like a giant Bethlehem star that many years ago. There's actually a guy at Notre Dame, a professor there, that researched it for like 10 years and thinks that the moon and Jupiter and Saturn aligned in 6 BC. So pretty cool. We haven't had this alignment in 800 years. So I'm excited. I really hope the cloud cover will be cleared out for that tomorrow night when it happens. There's something about light, right? Light, you can't see it, but it makes such a difference. Light, it can heat things up, even though you can't tell what it is. And I love how in our passage this morning that they say Jesus is the light of the world, and that this light has come to overcome darkness, and darkness won't overcome the light. And that is giving us hope, and I'm excited about that. I'm thrilled to be studying this. That's one of my favorite parts of Christmas, truly, are the candles that we get to see, the candles we get to light, the Christmas tree lights we get to see. It's a wonderful time of the year. And we see that and we can experience it largely because of the light that's as a part of it. You probably know this. I love that this planet thing is going to happen tomorrow night on December 21st. As you probably know, that is the winter solstice. That is the longest night of the year. There's the most hours of darkness on December 21st. And many believe that because we don't know exactly when Jesus was born, the church put it on a date that was near the December 21st time as a sign, as a symbol, as a reminder of the light overcoming the darkness, as a reminder that Christ is here in the darkest of days. And because of that, we as a church have hope when things look dim and dark. When things look dim and dark. Back when John wrote this passage, it was a pretty dim and dark time. John wrote this passage. The temple had been overthrown by the Roman Empire. The Jews and the Christians had been scattered throughout the empire. It was dark days. It was a time of intense persecution. It was dark. And John is writing this letter to his congregation. John, whose main thesis statement for all of his writings is that God is love and the importance of loving others. Love is about John, and John is about love. And God is about love. And so we hear these words and we know this. And we hear these words that these Jewish people who would have been scattered, most of his congregation, I think, was probably in Ephesus or nearby at that point. That's where he was. And he's writing to them. He's writing this gospel before he dies. He wants to remind people of the things that they might forget. There are places in John, if you study the whole book of John, you see that he wants to clarify things that by this many decades after the life and death and resurrection of Christ, people may be getting wrong. So he starts out with this beautiful beginning, this beautiful prologue, and it's a clear tie to the beginning of Genesis. In the beginning. In the beginning. And a good Jewish person would have heard it. We who have studied scriptures, we hear that in the beginning, and we tie this book all the way back to Genesis 1:1. So we can take this passage and we can hear it for what it is, as a promise that God has been with us since before the beginning, that Jesus has been with us since before the beginning. And we see this prologue of John as a promise that Jesus has come to be with us, God Emmanuel. As I think about Jesus coming and being this baby, this vulnerable, at-risk baby that had to be cared for by his mother and his father, I thought about the twinkling of a star. That when we look in the skies, and even if we have no light pollution and we have our eyes have adjusted to the dark, stars are just twinkling little pinpricks in the darkness. And I think about this baby. And in some ways, just as that twinkle of a star points to this giant, massive ball of gas, this giant star, this star many times probably bigger than our own sun. That's kind of like the difference between this baby who is God with us, the amount that God has stepped down to be with us in the form of Jesus, to the real power of God. And when I thought about that, it kind of blew my mind a little bit. That Jesus is willing to come down and humble himself to such a level to show us his love for us, to show us God's love for us. That's miraculous. That's amazing. That's beautiful. So just as when Jesus came, it was a dark time, right? Because it was Roman occupation, things weren't going great, and Jesus came in that historical time, and then it got worse, right? After Jesus died, it got worse. And then you've got John's time, and he writes the Gospel of John to give us hope in dark times, much like candlelight. Gives us light in the darkness. And John wanted to remind anyone who read this prologue that God is with us and is light and love in a dark world. Light and love in a dark world. And as I continued to kind of meditate on this idea of light in the darkness and that the darkness will not overcome it, it's daylight right now, but this neighborhood at Christmas time is glorious with the lighting, all the Christmas lights. And some houses, like this one, have a big spotlight, and you can see all the details of the house at once. And it's truly awe-inspiring. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. There's little darkness there. I thought about that as I walked through this neighborhood and considered that's kind of like the big aha. God reveals his whole plan to you, and you get a good big snapshot of God's picture. It's the aha we feel when we see a sunrise or a sunset or beautiful flowers or gorgeous birds. When prayers have been answered. When relationships are healed, we get that big aha of God, thank you. Thank you for this miracle. Thank you for bringing your light and your love into this situation or into this moment. We praise you and we thank you. And as I walked by other houses, I noticed some were decorated with little lights. And that made me think about us in the world, right? We're little lights. We're little lights that take God's love and reflect it out into the world. We take God's love into the world as we love our neighbors. As we go out and choose to do God's will in the world. It is something for which to be greatly thankful. Greatly thankful. And when one light is having a hard time, the others are around it to encourage it and support it. And if it goes out, the others can keep going and share that love of God, that love of Christ with those that come by. The other thing that was helpful as I wandered the streets again and looked at these gorgeous lights in this neighborhood, I thought about, anyone can walk these streets. Anyone can walk these streets and see these Christmas lights. They're beautiful. You don't have to be good. You don't have to pay. You don't have to do the right thing to see and enjoy these lights. And how we need to be that open with the love of God with others as well, that it's not about deserving it or earning it, but it's about the free gift of God's love to us. So it goes back to that more love idea. I think about what we have done as a church this year, even in the midst of 2020, to make a difference. And your generosity for our size church is truly astounding. I've mentioned it the last couple of Sundays because I want you to understand what an amazing job you all have done. I don't know how many of you all saw on Facebook this week, but Stacy Nelson, she and Josh with Legacy Ministries are members here. Those of you that are not here, they're members here at our church. Stacy's getting ready to come on as an elder, and they have this ministry. And we, through the generosity of this congregation, were able to provide blankets, warm blankets for all of the orphans in a particular orphanage, and Christmas presents, and several months of food. Additionally, because of your generosity, we were able to build a church in West Bengal. We are God's light and God's love in the world. We take the power of God and share it with others. And for that, I am thankful. I hope that as we go into Christmas Eve this coming week and into 2021, that we continue to look for ways, even as we're packing up our Christmas decorations, to maybe consider leaving one light out, to leave one candle out, to leave one reminder out that we are God's love in our world, that we are God's light in the world right now, that we are God's hands and feet, we are God's church. And for that, we can be thankful. Creator God, we thank you for your love that you give to us so generously, that we don't have to earn, that we don't have to ask for, that you love us because you created us, because we are your beloved. God, help us to be as free with your love to others as you are with it to us. In your name we pray. Amen.